Hey friends, doing something a little bit different today. In honor of Lightyear coming out in the past week, instead of doing a straight up review for it, I'm going to be tier listing and ranking all 26 Pixar films that I've seen. Just, for something different. And it's something that I do kind of want to start doing a little bit more to break up the, constant reviews. As for Lightyear, I enjoyed it. Is it upper tier Pixar? Not really, but we'll find out. But I thought it was a pretty fun time at the movies. But without further ado, we are going to get into this. I am going to be ranking them in chronological order. The tiers, I'm ranking them sort of like relative to each other. So it's not like if something's down the bottom, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It just means it might be lower tier Pixar because really they have very few bad movies. So let's get into it. Starting from the beginning with the first Toy Story, one of the first, if not the first, if I recall correctly, computer animated films ever, and it's a classic. Now, I've got to be honest, I'm not really that much of a Toy Story guy in that they're great films, but they were never like among my favorite animated films like a lot of other kids I knew. But Toy Story 1 is really great. It's probably the one I've rewatched the most frequently out of them, and yeah, I really can't say anything bad about it. I'm going to put it in B tier for now, which means it's still a pretty damn great movie, but it may go up. We'll see how the rest of the list falls. A Bug's Life. Now, this is one I haven't seen since I was a kid, but even then I remember it was never one of my favorites. Like, I enjoyed it, but it was just kind of there. It was never my go-to Pixar movie. I probably watched it a few times and then put it away for good. It's one I would like to go back to one day, but I'm going to put it in the C tier for now because it's a pretty good movie, but pretty unmemorable by Pixar standards. Toy Story 2, regarded by many as the pinnacle of that trilogy. I like them all pretty equally, but this one really upped the emotional stakes from the introduction of Jessie and everyone else, and it's a really, really great film that despite not having seen it in probably 10 years, I remember so much of it so vividly, and it's going to go right next to the first film in that B tier. And now we come to Monsters, Inc., which is one of my favorite animated films ever. Spoiler alert for maybe its placement, but Monsters, Inc. is a classic. It's a film that really... I watched it so many times as a kid. It scared me. It made me laugh. It made me cry. The characters are so iconic. It has great villains in Randall, Steve Buscemi, just iconic vocal performances from Billy Crystal and John Goodman as Mike and Sully, and they've just become two of the most iconic Pixar characters ever. And you bet your ass that Monsters, Inc. is going in that S tier. It is one of my absolute favorites. Finding Nemo kind of sits in Monsters, Inc. territory in that it's one that I really connected to as a kid and watched a lot, and I think the Australian element there really helps, like P. Sherman 42, Wallaby Way, Sydney, and so there's an Australianness to it that really obviously connected with me as a kid, and it was one of the first big American animated movies where I kind of saw not necessarily my culture, but some of our locations reflected on screen. And on top of that, it's just a really, really fun movie with a lot of memorable characters like Bruce the Shark. The turtles are awesome. Again, it's one I haven't really watched in quite a long time, but I remember it pretty much the entire thing vividly. And Finding Nemo is going to go in that A tier. Now we come to Brad Bird's first outing with Pixar, The Incredibles, which, as we all like to say, it's the Fantastic Four movie we wish we got. Now, The Incredibles is incredible. It set up this great family that, yes, it's a superhero action film, but it also just set up so many family struggles and dynamics that we could all relate to, and I think can still relate to large parts of it. Syndrome is one of Pixar's best villains ever. Again, so iconic, so quotable. My friends and I are quoting and memeing him almost weekly at this point, in the film's 18 years old. But I'm going to say it, The Incredibles is actually my favorite Pixar film, so we are dropping it in that S tier next to Monsters, Inc. Actually, no, let's keep this chronological. I'll rank them properly at the end. But yeah, The Incredibles is my favorite Pixar film. I absolutely adore it, and I still rewatch it pretty regularly to this day. Now, Cars is a tricky one because I watched it a lot as a kid and really loved it, and I had all my Lightning McQueen toys and stuff, but upon going back and thinking about it, it probably doesn't hold up as well as some of their other earlier work, so it's kind of this push and pull of critically looking at the film and looking at all the joy I had for it as a kid. So that kind of puts it between that D and C tier, so I'm going to put it in C, just because of the fond memories I have of that film. Now we come to Ratatouille, which is a beautiful film about appreciating food, appreciating life, and appreciating that you can do anything, even if you're a dirty, stinking rat. And I adore Ratatouille. It feels kind of, I don't know if it feels like unique or different for Pixar, but it's just refreshing to have a film that there's no like big adventure or giant conflict. It's just like contained to this kitchen and these characters learning to cook. And so I'm not going to say it's like low stakes because it has high emotional stakes, but I don't know, it's just sits off to the side as this like really beautiful appreciation of food from Pixar. And Brad Bird again knocks it out of the park, and it's one of my absolute favorites. So Ratatouille is an S, baby. WALL-E, which is one of Pixar's, I guess, most like social and political films in terms of its messaging about the environment. And it's one where maybe some of the commentary went over my head when I first saw it as a kid, but you look back on it and it's like, yeah, like, you know, it's kind of on the nose, but it's so good. Like the imagery of all the people running around in their chairs on the big ship is really funny. And also it's just like a really, really beautiful story of this robot looking for friendship and stuff. And WALL-E, I really love WALL-E. WALL-E is gonna be joining Finding Nemo in that A tier. And a common thing here is I'm finding that Pixar standalone movies are where I'm really at, in that I know that the Toy Stories are regarded as classics, but I don't know, I'm more into the one and done sort of stuff, I have to say. And onto another standalone Pixar joint is Up, which is a little divisive among my friends, I think, but I'm a really, really big fan of it, and I've probably watched it more than just about any other Pixar movie when I was a kid. And it's a beautiful adventure. The balloons, iconic. Ed Asner's great as old mate Carl, I think his name is. And that opening 10 minutes, dude. Not the first person to discuss that, but holy shit, that is just brutal, touching, heartbreaking, and it all comes full circle in the end. I think it maybe the third act's not as strong as the rest of the film, but I really love Up, and it's one of my favorites, and it is going in that A tier. Toy Story 3 now might be my favorite of the Toy Story films, probably because I saw it at an age when I was like the most receptive to that film. I would have been maybe like 12 or 13, and it was like just as I'm at an age where I'm paying attention to film, and just before I got too cool to love animated movies. I'm no longer too cool to love animated movies, obviously, but throughout a lot of my teenage years, a lot of these films fell out of my life and they're only just coming back to me. But Toy Story 3 is just a beautiful culmination of that series, and as someone who like sort of hit that age where Andy gets to and has to throw away childish things and stuff, it's one that I found a lot to relate to in. It introduces a lot of great new characters, a great villain in Lotso Huggins Bear, and some other scarier henchman types, and the furnace scene is just, I don't know, it's the Toy Story film that sticks out to me the most. I know the original has all the iconic meme lines. Toy Story 2 has like the introduction of some of the most important characters in the series, but 3 is just where it all comes together for me, and it's really close between that A and B tier for me, and I think I am going to stick it in A, even if it's just for me to avoid putting all the Toy Story movies in the same tier, because that feels kind of lazy. From here, maybe a few less classics, a few more misses creeping in, which is only natural when you're doing a bunch of sequels. And here we have Cars 2, which probably one of their most maligned films, and I agree. I saw it once when it came out and it did nothing for me. In fact, it's the only Pixar film that I actively dislike, so it is going to go in that E tier. Sorry, Cars 2. There's no F tier here because it's not like horrible, but it's probably the only film here that I can comfortably say I'll never watch again. Now, Brave. Brave is one I only got to pretty recently, actually, and I really enjoyed it. Again, it's not like upper tier Pixar. It does a lot of stuff we've seen before, but the performances are great. I love the exploration of Scottish lore, as one of my best friends is Scottish, so really got me on board for all of that stuff. But yeah, again, it's a fun movie. It has some standout moments, great performances, but it's not top tier Pixar, but it's a good movie. So it's gonna go in C for me, I think. I don't even know if anything's gonna end up in D at this point, but we'll see. Actually, yeah, something is gonna end up in D, because here we come to Monsters University, which again is a film I saw once when it came out. And I thought, even then, I was like, why does this film exist? Like, it has a couple fun moments, but it didn't, like, it doesn't really do anything to justify its own existence the way a couple of other Pixar sequels have. So it's fine, you know, there's nothing outright wrong with it, but I really barely remember anything from it at this point. So Monsters University is gonna occupy that D tier for us here. Congratulations, San Francisco, you ruined pizza. Here we come to Inside Out, which is one of my favorite Pixar films, and I think probably their best effort of the last decade. It's a beautiful film that has, yes, a very obvious metaphor, but, you know, this film has done so much, and it's already a film that people are showing to kids to help them understand their own mental health, and that it's okay to be sad and angry sometimes, and it's really beautiful. The Bing Bong scene, like I dare you to, I'm tearing up just thinking about it a little bit. The cast are delightful. Just the whole mechanic of the inner workings of the brain is so delightful. Like the orbs with the memories and stuff. It's such a beautiful way of articulating the way our brains work. Sure, it's very simplified, but it's done so elegantly, and it's one of my favorite Pixar films and one of my favorite animated films, and it is also going to join that A tier as one of my 4 favorites. The Good Dinosaur. Now, I feel like I'm one of the only people who's like defending this movie, but that's purely, I think, because it has really beautiful animation. It's one of their most gorgeous looking films, I think. But other than that, kind of a Lion King ripoff, kind of like you can tell what the ending's going to be from the opening 5 minutes. And again, I liked this one, but it just felt kind of pointless, I guess. And it's something that we've seen before a million times, just really beautifully. Like the environmental animation in this one was really gorgeous. So it's a good movie, but relative to Pixar, it's going to go in D. It's sort of hovering between that C and D tier, but yeah, that's where it's going to go. Finding Dory, another one and done. Saw it once when it came out, had no urge to go back to it, and that's been a problem with a lot of these Pixar sequels, in that they're fine, but aside from maybe Toy Story 4, I don't know if any of them have really fully justified their own existence. I enjoyed Finding Dory. There were some great new characters. I enjoyed the octopus. Again, other than that, not much stuck out to me for it. I think it's definitely a cut above Monsters University as a sequel. So it's going to go in the C tier because, like, it's well done, it's well animated, and I remember enjoying it. But aside from that, it's like, yeah, I don't really have any urge to go back to this one. So it's going to go in C. Cars 3, I actually like really enjoyed. I went and saw it in theaters with like no expectations, and I thought it was kind of like pretty good. Like, I was there. I enjoyed the discussion on like legacy and everything like that, and One Last Ride, and the racing scenes were gorgeously rendered. I liked that it sort of took Lightning McQueen back to basics rather than the second one that was just trying all this other random crap. But I really enjoyed Cars 3. I don't know if it's quite like B tier, because it's definitely not on the level of the Toy Story ones, but I think it's a better film than everything else I've got there in the C tier. So it's gonna go in the B tier for now. Keep the numbers even, but it's borderline. But yeah, I enjoyed Cars 3 more than most. Look, if a film makes me cry, I'm gonna love it. So Coco is pretty high on my list. I know some people have their issues with it, but I thought it was a beautiful exploration of the Day of the Dead. Something that a few animated films have done really well. Like, I recommend The Book of Life. That was a really sweet one too. But yeah, Coco, I thought it was great. Loved everyone's performances. The animation is stunning. The villain's a little bit predictable and everything like that, but just the whole second half of that film is some of the most emotionally devastating stuff Pixar have ever done. Remember Me is a wonderful song, and all the other songs in it are wonderful as well. So Coco is pretty easily going in that A tier for me. Incredibles 2, the only Pixar film to come out in theaters with a seizure warning, is one that I really enjoyed at the time, but upon thinking about it, I'm not really as fond of it as I was when I first saw it. It's pretty fun, pretty well animated. It was great to revisit those characters, but the villains really left a lot to be desired, and yeah, it really went down in my estimations the second time I watched it. So Incredibles 2, it's going to go in the C tier. Again, I think it's like in the upper echelon of that C tier, but it's nothing really to write home about for me. Toy Story 4, I mentioned earlier as a sequel that justifies its existence. And I really think it does, because I'm a big fan of Toy Story 4, and it's actually not that far off of the original trilogy in terms of how much I love it. I loved the carnival setting. Again, as we get older, we continue to relate to the struggles of these toys and these human beings surrounding these toys. I love the little army man who wanted a high five. I love what they do with Bo Peep's character. I love the addition of Key and Peele as those fluffy toys. They were a lot of fun. Yeah, I really loved everything this film was about, and you bet your ass the ending reduced me to a goddamn puddle. So Toy Story 3 is going to join 1 and 2 on the B tier. It's more Cars 3 than Toy Story 1 and 2, but it's pretty comfortably in the B tier for me. Onward, which was I think the last one to be released in theaters before up until now with Lightyear, was It was decent. Again, it's one that like I enjoyed when I watched it, but I don't have much desire to rewatch. The vocal performances were fine. It might hit you a lot harder if you have that sort of brother relationship, which is not something that I have. That's not to say I couldn't like relate to the film, but it's just to say that I thought it was fine. There wasn't really any point where it transcended what it was for me. It's a tough one. It's going to go in the D tier for me because I don't like it as much as those other films above it. It's not bad, but it was really, really overshadowed by Soul in the year that it came out. And that is what we come to next, Soul, which is a film that I was a big, big fan of. Shame it took Pixar this long to tell a story about African-American characters. And I do think it's a shame that the character spends so much time in the body of a cat. They seem to often do that, turn people of color into creatures or skeletons or whatever. But that gripe aside, I really love this. I love Tina Fey as a character that honestly, if not done right, could have annoyed the absolute shit out of me. But I ended up really enjoying her character, and some of the animation towards the end is absolutely gorgeous. And it's really a film that makes you reflect on life. And it's one it's sort of between A and B, but it's going to go in A for me because I am a big fan of Soul, and I think it deserved the Oscar. Luca, definitely on the lower end of Pixar for me, if only because of how slight it is, but it was almost a refreshingly low stakes, and it feels like a Studio Ghibli film in some ways, and it's just we're hanging out on this island with beautiful oceans, and the whole conflict of the film is like a bike race, which I really, really adored. The vocal performances were great. It's not one that left much of a lasting impact or left me thinking about it, but it's a really nice, sweet, charming movie that I definitely can see myself rewatching at some point. So Luca's going to go in the C tier. It's getting crowded in those C and A tiers, but that's kind of the two realms that Pixar exists for me the most, in that like pretty damn good and then like enjoyable, but not much more. And they have very little bad. They have some absolute masterpieces, but they have very, very few bad films. And now we have to get to the next two, Turning Red, which I reviewed, so you'd know that I really, really enjoyed Turning Red. It's a wonderful story of puberty. The animation is gorgeous. I loved all the big action scenes toward the end, which I wasn't expecting, but they were very welcome. So I actually think it's pretty solid. It's in that upper half of Pixar for me. So Turning Red is going to join that B tier. I was a really, really big fan of it. And lastly, we come to Lightyear, which is the whole reason I'm doing this video, to honor it. In short, it sort of falls in that, I don't know if it's a one and done. I could see myself watching again, but I really, really enjoyed it. I have some problems with where the narrative goes in the second half, but it introduces some delightful characters. Chris Evans was great. I love Taika Waititi's appearance. So the new characters, it's a really, really fun sort of misfit group of friends. And I just love space movies, and it has that real strong sense of space adventure. It's got great music, great sound design. It's lower tier Pixar, but it's pretty good. It's going to go in that C category, which again is getting very crowded. But yeah, Lightyear's pretty good. I definitely recommend it. So to finalize our rankings here, some stuff might change tiers here because I like symmetry, but that top 4 S's, that's like pretty solid, my far and away 4 favorites. But to rank them, The Incredibles is my favorite Pixar film. My second favorite's probably going to be Ratatouille. I love Brad Bird so much. You add those to the Iron Giant, he is probably my favorite animation director besides some of the Studio Ghibli guys. Between Monsters Inc. and Inside Out, Monsters Inc. is going to come in third for my childhood reasons, and Inside Out is not far behind it there too. Now, the A tier, that is where ranking them gets pretty tricky. Up is going to go pretty high because that film just emotionally devastated me, and I have really fond memories of watching it many, many times as a kid. Maybe controversial, but Coco is going to go next because it's definitely one of my favorites of the last decade. Finding Nemo can stay right there, an absolute childhood favorite. And I'm pretty happy with this order. WALL-E, Toy Story 3, Soul, I think that is pretty good right there. The B tier, Toy Story 1 and 2 can stay there purely because I've rewatched Toy Story 1 more recently. Toy Story 2, I might go back and rewatch it and be blown away by it, but it's been a very long time. And Toy Story is one that is just, it's one of the most important animated films of all time, just in terms of what it did for the medium and the, blah, blah, blah. I love Toy Story. Toy Story 2 can stay right there. Toy Story 4 is going to come in next. Sorry for putting them all next to each other, but it's my list. Cars Turning Red is going to go above Cars 3. It's a really, really great film and a pleasant surprise. I liked it a lot more than I expected to, and Cars 3 can stay right there. The C tier, which is getting pretty crowded. My favorite here is probably Incredibles 2. I know what didn't sound very glowing and positive about it, but it's still got a lot of great action scenes. And, it's a sequel to The Incredibles. It's pretty hard to mess that up. Next up is this is actually really hard. I think in my personal ranking I have a lot, but I'm going to put Luca up here because the more I think about it, the more I just really, really appreciate what that film is in the Pixar canon. Next up is going to be Brave. Again, it's a really, really distinct film, and I love how it digs into Scottish folklore and culture. I'm going to move the original Cars down to D, actually, because because I want to. Symmetry. Here, I'm going to put Lightyear above Finding Dory. It was a really, really fun time. And Finding Dory's clinging on for dear life in that C tier, I reckon, but it's going to stay there. D tier, Cars can stay at the top. I'm going to actually put Onward next because, again, a lot of these C and Ds, I am repeating myself. But, yeah, good, not much more. Good Dinosaur can go next. I enjoyed that film. Monster University, I barely remember. And Cars 2 is the one actively bad one, in my opinion. So that is it for my Pixar rank list. This was pretty fun to do. I'll definitely try and do more of these when the occasion arises. So that's it for this video. Hit me up in the comments. What are your favorite Pixar movies? Feel free to eviscerate me for having the Toy Story films only in B tier. But again, this is relative to Pixar, and those are pretty damn great films. They were just never among my absolute favorites while growing up. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Go see Lightyear in theaters. It's just nice to be able to see a Pixar movie back in theaters. And stay tuned, more reviews coming. I've seen basically all the new releases, but I just haven't had a lot of time to film reviews, so I thought I'd do this longer sort of video as a bit of a placeholder until a bit more free time opens up. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.